Welcome to the Veterinary Rehabilitation Podcast, where we aim to help fellow veterinary rehab therapists increase their knowledge and elevate their practice. I'm Megan Kelly.
And I'm Anae Lloyd. Together, we bring you the latest insights, research, and information in the field of veterinary rehabilitation.
This podcast is brought to you by Onlinepethealth, a leading continuing education membership for veterinary rehabilitation therapists. With Onlinepethealth, you will have access to a wide range of online resources to help you stay up to date with the latest techniques, advances, and trends in the industry.
Our podcast features in-depth conversations with leading experts in veterinary rehabilitation. They share their own experiences and knowledge to help you improve your practice. Whether you're a seasoned pro or just starting out in the field, our goal is to provide you with the tools and the insights you need to succeed.
So join us as we explore the exciting world of veterinary rehabilitation and help you take your practice to the next level. Hey vet rehabbers, in this episode, Jessica Bunch and I dive into her journey into veterinary rehabilitation, starting out inside a general practice that didn't offer rehab at all. She shares brilliant practical tips on how to introduce rehab services into a clinic that's brand new to the idea and what really helps teams understand the value. From there, we explore the big questions so many vet rehabbers wrestle with when they're starting their own practices. Do you grow slowly as the finances allow, or do you go all in with loans and invest in all the equipment up front? Jessica talks through the pros and cons of both paths with honesty and clarity and offers guidance from her own experience that will resonate with anyone building or expanding a vet rehab practice. Now, in February, it's our birthday month, and we're celebrating with our friends from the Masterson Method to share 2 free webinars with you. The first one is Gelding Scars, a Masterson Method Perspective by Jim Masterson and Vanessa Helby. And then the small animal one is When Less is More, Masterson Method in Canine Rehabilitation by Jim Masterson. You can head over to onlinepethealth.com/gift to sign up to either of those 2 free webinars. A quick word from our sponsor before we dive into today's topic. At Paw Prosper, we believe true pet well-being demands a 3-pronged approach: prevention, support, and rehabilitation. Our brands are trusted by veterinarians, universities, and rehab facilities alike. So whether you're looking to train, rehabilitate, or help your patients age gracefully, our brands Walking Pets, Help 'em Up, Respond Animal Therapeutics, Foot Paws, Muffins Halo, 3D Parting Canine Carts offer effective, innovative, and proven solutions. You can sign up today to receive a one-time special gift for all our podcast listeners, and all you need to do is head over to pawprosper.com/OPH. Right, over to my chat with Jessica. Hey Jessica, thank you so much for joining me.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me. I appreciate it.
Jessica, for the listeners, won't you tell them a bit about yourself and how you got into the field of vet rehab?
Yeah, no problem. So my name is Jessica Bunch. I work currently at Washington State University, our teaching hospital at Washington State here in Pullman, Washington, which is on the west coast of or western part of the United States. So my journey in rehab has been probably like a lot of people's, I would suspect. I mean, I know it varies quite a bit, but I was a general practitioner for many years to start first in kind of mixed animal practice and then eventually transitioned to small animal practice only. And during my time in general practice, so I think I'd been in practice for probably about over 10 years. I think a lot of us can appreciate we start to have some, I didn't recognize it at the time because compassion fatigue wasn't really quite the term we realized what was going on then. But now I look back and realize, oh, hey, that was what was happening. And I was kind of struggling a little bit with that and focus of where I wanted to be in my profession. And luckily, I had gone to some continuing education on, what else can you do for your senior patient, and it was all about physical rehabilitation. And having had a lot of that done myself, for me, I thought, this really interests me. This is something I could really get behind, and kind of reignited my passion in veterinary medicine again. So the private practice I worked at, so I was in general private practice, and it was a fairly large practice. We did a fair amount of orthopedic surgeries. So I convinced them. I said, "Hey, I think this would be something great to add to the practice. Negotiated that, and we already had somebody who was doing acupuncture and chiropractic at our practice. So, but this was not too hard to sell to do, and so they like, I went and did my training and came back. And so for my first, I would say, several years in practicing in rehab, it was a combination of, you know, 30%-ish rehab and then the rest general practice still, right? And working in a practice that was not designed for rehab. They were not going to, they said, we'll send you and do this training, but we're not going to go putting in an underwater treadmill. We're not going to redesign our clinic. You're going to have to, until we can see that it's going to be profitable and sustainable. So, work within what you can, right? So I did learn to work within the confines of having limited space and resources. Life happens, and I ended up moving back to where I'm actually from originally, where I live, for family, and took a job doing similar things. So I was doing a little bit of rehab, a lot of general practice, and I started doing my acupuncture certification. And at that time, so where I was practicing, it was about a half hour, an hour to our local university. So I'm lucky that I work in this area where we have this Washington State University, and we have a teaching hospital and the program. And they happen to be also wanting to expand their rehab services. When I got back in, I kind of advertised myself to the area, right? Because I was the only one in the area that I thought of that was doing rehab. And so I, of course, including advertising myself to the university. And then I got contacted not too long after that of, hey, we would be interested in expanding. And actually, they had a tech run service at the time, and it was smaller, and they were interested in potentially expanding it. And would I be interested? So fast forward about a year, they said nothing happens overnight in the university, which is 100% true. It's so slow. About a year later, they reached out to me, and I interviewed and got the job, and basically then built our service here at the university. So that's been my journey. I've been here 9 years now. And so now, and my goal had been when I moved back home, it was a temporary position to take care of my father. And I was like, I'm not going to be doing this forever. I want to do just rehab and integrative medicine, but I wasn't sure how that was going to look. And so kind of it was a circumstance thing to how it happened. And I'm very happy where I'm at now. So 100% integrative now, and run our service. Students have built our service. Went from one technician, I have two technicians now. So it's two technicians and myself. And I just finished my residency in canine sports med rehab. So get boarded. Hopefully, I will then hopefully be adding an internship or residency program as well. So it's been that last 9 years has definitely been a intensive journey. But the thing that still has been a struggle here is I still don't have space. So I'm working in an older hospital that is outdated and needs, well, the building itself, the structure is small. We do have, at least I do have a little more resources and tools, underwater treadmill, all the modalities. What I really lack though is physical just space, right? And so I can't do as much groundwork as some places can. And we are literally working out of two small rooms, boxes. And I've visited many other rehab facilities, colleagues, mentors, other universities, and we are definitely very small compared to most, but we make it work. And I feel like we're still very successful. Of course, I would love to have more, but you learn, and my space has actually doubled since I've been here, which is not saying much, but I was in one room, now I'm in two. So hey, there's something. So, but it really does become what you put your mind to, and just looking at what you can do, because there's still so much you can do even with having a tiny space. And I think there's a lot of different options, which is what's great about, I think, what we do with rehab. So,
Yeah, for
so
sure.
that's how I got here.
Yeah, I think this topic is a great one, and I think you've got so much experience in this, just listening to your journey. So we're going to be chatting about how to build a vet rehab practice with very little resources. And when we talk about resources, I guess there's a few ways in which we can see that.
Hmm.
So it could be money, it could be
Yeah.
equipment, and then it's also space.
Hmm.
I mean, you've obviously had that. So I don't know how you managed in the one room. So did you always have you and the two techs in one room?
No, so I had one technician at the time. I just added the other, and I would say the other thing to increasing your resources is your support staff, right? So from that perspective. So that's actually how I have grown my service the most in the past year and a half is by adding a second technician. So that was definitely has been a boost for us as far as what I can we can literally do, how many patients we can see and treat. So yeah, initially it was just the one technician and myself, but I also have students. So it would be there were times we were in this little room and it would be myself, the tech, the student, up to 3 or 4 students. Now I have it limited to 2 students typically, not more than 2 or 3 because in the space. I was really gung ho in the beginning. I was like, sure, everybody come, and then I realized, oh, this is a good idea. The patient and then sometimes the owner, right? And we're all like into this little, yeah, it was a lot of crawling around each other and being very comfortable with invading each other's personal space. But I mean, we made it work and we extended out into other areas of the hospital, not just because we had to. So, it might be the hallway. It could be we'd go out into the barns and like use the breezeway or go outside if it was nice and we had like an outside area where we could close it off and I could have the dogs watch gait analysis, and so really looking at how to expand and utilize any available chunk of space I could in the hospital. And I did the same thing in private practice too, because in private practice, I didn't have a dedicated space. I had like an exam room and that was it, right? So I had my exam room and then luckily at least at one of the practices, the exam room we had just remodeled. When we did that, we had tables that came down from the wall so we could fold them up. So that left the room open, which was great for me. So I did everything on the floor. I never had an animal up on the table. Everything was on the floor. And then I'd use the hallway a lot. Again, it was a mixed, every practice I've been at has been a mixed animal practice when I've been doing rehab. So even though I did small animal, I could utilize the large animal spaces for things, and I would utilize the loading ramps, for inclines and different things. So it is a lot of thinking. I feel you have to really rehab's thinking outside the box anyways, but then you kind of really have to do that a little more when you have space and resource issues too. So
So let's chat about a few different scenarios. So one of the
yeah.
scenarios which you mentioned actually in your journey is when you were doing general practice and then
Hmm.
trying to get the rehab like happening there. And
Hmm.
this happens so often, right?
Yeah.
And you're in the situation now where you 100% believe in it. You know,
Hmm.
this is
Yeah.
like this is the right thing we need to do, but you're trying to convince the other partners or the other veterinarians that this is the way to go. And you have to do it with complete limited resources, and
Yeah.
that's usually space, equipment, everything.
Hmm.
So let's chat a bit about that scenario. So, how did you manage it? Because
Yeah.
here you are trying to prove this is actually something
Hmm.
that is successful and that we should be doing, and we're going to see results when you're not actually consulting and practicing in an ideal situation.
Hmm. And I think that is really challenging. And I feel blessed that I have where I'm at now because I look back now and I'm like, oh my gosh, how would I wasn't there long enough to really see how I would have been able to grow it. I mean, I'm sure I would have been able to, and it would have gone with time, but it's been so much easier being in a space where this is my job, right? 100%. Like this is what I can dedicate myself to. But um, luckily I had good buy-in from my owners, so I was not an owner in any of these practices. And granted now I'm in the university setting, so I'm not an owner truly, but I am the service lead. So I like really do own my service in a way, right? I mean, I don't have the money part, but I have the say in everything else. So the what I really had to do is I did have to come to them with a model to start with of like where I thought just to convince them to let me go. So and to pay for my training. And a lot of it was here's your need. Here's what we don't have in the area. Like we didn't really have a lot in the area. We did have a hydrotherapy place near us that was it was not it was more of a they should require referrals. I know it's different in each country, but so she wasn't a veterinarian or technician, but she had done some hydro training. And so in the States here, it's a little different. Like there's not really certifications per se, but she was a client of ours too, though, and we had a really good working relationship. So her and I formed a really good relationship right off the bat. I said, "Hey, here's the deal. Like, there's going to be times I'm going to want to send my patients to you, and we'll work together." So I think that's another
Mm.
resource is if you don't have something near you, you have at your facility, because I did not have hydro, that if you have that available near you in a different manner, then finding a way to work with that if you have a patient that you feel, hey, this patient's really going to benefit. She didn't do anything beyond that in some massage, so she would send them to me, for a work. She'd recommend, hey, you go to have a workup here, get a plan. I would do my part. I would send them back to her. So we had a really nice relationship, and that helped. Um, I really had to kind of focus on, here's what we can do with our post-operative patients. We need to like really try to sell them on, you're already, this is something we should just include as a standard of care after our
Mm.
patients go home. I should be talking to the owner. We should be doing home exercises at least. If they won't come in for therapy, they should at least be doing some things at home. We charge for that, kind of having those thoughts and, going from there. And I think once we started looking at that and having those conversations, it took a little time, but word gets out, and especially if you start getting yourself out. I went and I talked to a couple like agility groups and some training groups and try to get, my name out there a little bit just to get that. And I also set up a schedule of saying, here's the thing, like I'm gonna need more time than this 20 minute appointment, wellness appointment. Like rehab takes longer, but then cost wise, we have to balance that out of how we're going to charge without overcharging for it. Nobody paid, right? So that balance. And of course, as time went on, I became more efficient, but they were willing to let me have some time in the beginning, which was great. So they're very supportive that way. As long as they said, well, we're not. I mean, I knew going in, they said, we're not going to buy a lot of stuff. Like we have to see how this works before we'd start investing money in things. So I had a day or two a week that those were my intake days where I would do, assessments, and then and treatments on those days. So, the rest of the days I was doing regular things and then consulting with them, and helping the surgeons with, various things as far as going home and talking to clients, but doing regular and then having basically either a day and a half to 2 days a week that were just rehab focused. That's how I did it. And I know it just depends upon the practice and your practice structure. But I felt if I didn't have that like set aside time, it was less likely I was going to get it worked into my schedule. But I know probably other people, do it a little differently too. So that's always a hard one.
And then did you use one of the consult rooms when they were just not in use? I mean, where did
hmm
you find the space?
Yeah, so we did have luckily, like I said, in this first clinic I was at, we had just remodeled and we had enough we had quite a few exam rooms, enough per clinician that I usually could have a dedicated space, and they knew that that space that day, that room, and it was the largest exam room, was going to be the one that I would utilize. And I actually did have I shortly after I started, I was able to convince them there was enough room in there to put kind of a small shelving unit, and I had some of my equipment in there. So I did get a few small pieces of balance equipment, and I handmade a lot of equipment, and then put that in there. So that just lived in that area, and that was kind of known then that that was going to be the room that was used for those things, but it was used for anything else in between.
Times before when I've worked at practices, when I've tried to, I mean, a very similar type of history, like, got interested in the rehab, but still had to do some GP work and then trying to get that rehab started. In a lot of practices, they sometimes consult in the morning and then they
hmm
have a sort of window period where they're doing surgeries. And
Yeah.
then the consult rooms are available then. And that was when I used to try and see patients. But one of the things you were mentioning now was how you were doing some days rehab, and then other days, you were supporting them in GP work. But I remember when I was very similar. And then
Hmm.
those days that I wasn't doing rehab work, I would see patients like a dog being like, x-rayed for hip dysplasia, and the rehab brain would just switch on.
Hmm.
And I'd just be like, oh, I just want to show the owner, I just want to do this, you just want to go into the rehab, right? You just
Yeah.
every single time something sidetracks you and you think, oh, I don't want to do that dental. I want to be doing what they're doing and pet that dog.
Yep. Yeah. No, it's hard. It's hard because you see all the opportunities once you start doing that and you've done your training and you just like all of a sudden, even your physical exams, right? Like I felt like after doing the training, my physical exams were so much better. I mean, I know I only had this short period of time, but all of a sudden I was picking up on all these things that I'm like, oh my gosh, I've been missing this musculoskeletal exam. I've been missing it.
Yeah.
I've not been doing it as well as I could have. But I guess looking back, even though I may not have had the time to, at that moment, go through everything, I could still say, hey, I'm picking up a problem. We need to readdress this, get them back in later on if they were interested, or at least for a recheck and have a conversation and a longer appointment, later on. So that, I mean, it still led to things. It just maybe always didn't lead to a full rehab, consult
Yeah.
too. So, yeah.
Is there any other advice you could give to those that are in practice that are trying to add the rehab in?
Yeah. I think that I mean, getting creative with making like you don't have to have a lot of things, honestly. Like I remember when I started taking the training, I thought, can I really do this? Like they're not going to put in an underwater treadmill for me. Like I'm not going to have hydro. And the nice thing was the first day of my rehab courses, right? And I always just remember this, and I tell my students this too. I said, they told us right off the bat, there's two things you need to do rehab, and that's your brain and your hands. And I thought, well, great, so like as long as I have those two things, I'm going to be able to help my patients, even with a small amount of things. I mean, I'm grateful and glad that I have everything I have now, and I wouldn't want to have not have that, but now that I'm spoiled, but there's still many ways that you can. And so just thinking that you're not limited. I mean, you are, but you're not at the same time. There's still ways that if you don't have equipment, you're going to focus more on your manual therapies then, right? And those skills. So you're switching that way and knowing what resources you have around you that you can utilize if you feel like I really need this patient. Is there something else that I can do? How else can we address this? If I don't have this, how do I do this? Those modalities are tools. They're literally just tools, and there's still always different ways of around it. And then you can make a lot of things, which is always pretty amazing to me. Our clients are pretty amazing at what they'll come up with, and what we can come up with too is pretty. I've made quite a fifth step here and there over the time with very little things recycled, recycled type of equipment. And I think the other is just thinking again of everything that's involved in rehab, and so it's not just the it's the consulting on their home environment, consulting on their exercise. You can make it where are you? I mean, there's people who are doing mostly a lot of times are doing especially during COVID, telemedicine, right? So there was no space involved with that, right? Besides your computer and this, but you're looking and involved in doing that. I mean, I'm a hands-on person, so I appreciate to do that, but still, talking him through home exercises and doing different things that way. And, there's a lot you can still do even without having that, I think. And then utilizing staff, I think, is the other big one too. So I know I've talked to some of my students about if you are working for a practice and they are thinking about adding rehab, but they want you to still be doing general practice. How do you sustain that and really build it? And I think it really comes down to if you have to do both jobs and wear both hats, you're going to need a trained assistant or technician who can do the treatments for you. So that way, and that's what I hadn't got to that far yet before I got to the university, luckily, but there's just no way that you're going to be able to do. I really just don't think you can make it profitable by being that you're doing all of that and you're trying to do general practice. So I think you doing the consult, setting up the treatment plan, all those things, but then handing that treatments, the ones that are due to your trained staff, that's where you can utilize them to do that, and you can still be seeing other cases, right? I think that's probably the main way you can make it profitable in a general practice where you're adding it to is kind of my thought anyways.
Yeah, I think sometimes when we start, we think it's like us, and then we must do
Mhm.
everything.
Yeah.
But we need a team, right? And so we need those
Mhm.
those other people. They're there for a reason, and they've got skills that we don't necessarily have, and we should be
Mhm.
focusing on the skills that we have. So
Yeah.
that's great advice. Let's dive into a different scenario.
Yeah.
So we have a vet rehab therapist. They are qualified. They're wanting to start their own practice. And, generally there are two options. And having interviewed so many vet rehabbers from all over the world in my Behind the Vet Rehab Practice podcast, I've seen and heard all the different types of ways. The two main ways is the first way is just to go really, really slowly and,
Mhm.
start mobile, start adding equipment as and when you've got funds and hire the next one person to help you, and then maybe go and branch out into
Mhm.
brick and mortar. The second way, which a few therapists have actually done and done successfully, maybe a
Mhm.
little bit scarier, is just to go all in, you know?
Yeah.
So get a loan, find the place, either buy it, rent it, renovate, buy the
Mhm.
underwater treadmill, buy the laser, and just go all in and start. So I love to chat about those two scenarios. So for
Mhm.
me, I'm the first one. That was me.
Mhm.
Started very slow. I'm a bit risk averse, so that other way is really scary. And there's some
Yeah.
people that, like I said, have done it amazingly. And I know you from your experience, you've had to start off slowly, and that's how you've done
Mhm.
it. So
Yeah.
let's chat about those two scenarios
Yeah.
and the pros and cons of each.
Yeah, no, and I actually this is an interesting question because I have gone through this scenario in my mind. When I was looking at how could I, because my goal was to start a rehab service and to leave general practice. And I had started doing the planning, looking at small business loans. Like I had my thing set up, like what was I going to do? And I didn't end up doing this, but still I had looked into it. So yeah, that's always a tough one, and I look at now too, like, thinking if I was to leave here, how would I do it? Because 'Cause I'm not going back to general practice. I'm staying in the rehab world, so how would I do it? And I feel like the risk aversion part of me and my age now, I would be like, "Oh, I think I need to start with the smaller. I don't know if I wanna make that big commitment." I think that boy, there's just so many different pros and cons to both. I think the advantages of starting small is that you do have less risk. It's easier to maybe, build as you go and, you know, it may be a little more comfortable to take on. And your schedule can be far flexible. So maybe your scenario, depending on your home life, that might actually work out better. Depends on a lot of things, I think that way. But you can be more flexible with how you work then because you're doing home, house call or however you're doing it mobile. Um, so yeah, that there is that, but the downside, of course, is stagnant. I think being stagnant. So how fast would you grow? Are you going to grow fast enough? Are you going to bring in enough? Are you going to make enough to sustain yourself? You may not have any employees yet, or maybe one, but will you make enough to ever continue to grow, or are you going to just stay in that lane, right? And not ever really, and that would be my fear is I wouldn't push myself potentially, or would I just this just wouldn't it's just you'd barely squeak by, right? That'd be kind of um a little bit of my concern as far as the cons. And so then you got the full in, right? So let's go fully in. And I think of course the big downside to that being the risk of what if this all just falls apart? What if you can't make the mortgage? What if you can't, all the different things that can happen that with that. So I think it's a different model and you're going to have staff. You're going to have, it is going to be a bigger thing, but your potential for growth and sustainability over time, I think is greater if you can make it through those first year, 2 years of really struggling and then and then go from there. And it's interesting because I've seen people go the opposite way too, right? Like, there's a rehabber near me who she kind of started small with somebody else. So she was doing acupuncture chiropractic, got her rehab training, was working a little bit herself, and then she started her own. So she went out brick and mortar. She was renting the building, but she had the building, had the staff, grew very fast. There's a definite need. And then she now is the lease is up, she's selling and she's going back to mobile. So she's going to cut back and go back smaller, which I'm sure there's many reasons behind that. I haven't talked to her personally to find out, but like it's interesting to see that like I know she has plenty of business because I send her a lot. Like I know it takes a while to get into her, so I know she's busy, but it's I'm sure a combination of reasons why. So it's yeah, that's a really interesting one.
So sometimes we think we want that big practice and
Mm-hmm.
everything that comes with it. And then when you're there, you're like, I
Yeah.
just prefer it when it was small. So I had a very similar experience. So I can remember when I had my practice, it was just me and I had one tech. And I loved those times. It was simple, didn't have
Mm-hmm.
loads of staff. I had my underwater treadmill. I was consulting. Everything just was easy because I didn't have to manage loads of people. And
Mm-hmm.
then it grew, and eventually I had like 6 staff members. And I think that was that's the hard part for a lot of us, is
Yeah.
that I sort of started getting more and more removed from doing the work that I loved, which was using my hands and treating, and other people were doing that, and I was managing. And sorting out and putting out fires. And yeah, so I think that's one of the things, just talking about that all in,
Mm-hmm.
you have to be prepared for, because you're just literally going all in to managing
Yeah.
staff. If you're going to have a big a big practice like that, and you've got the underwater treadmill, you're going in from just you to managing a whole lot of staff. And like there should be like a curriculum in veterinary about dealing with staff, because it's
Yes.
really
Yes.
not easy.
Yes. No.
I mean, I actually, when I had my practice, I actually went to a lady, like a communications lady, like the type of person you would go to if you and your husband were like having problems communicating. And I went to go see her, not for any relationships, but actually to help me to be able to communicate better with my staff, because
Yeah.
I just felt like here I am saying these things and I'm just not getting it. And then dealing with all the different personalities and everything. I mean, we can talk about that for ages,
Yeah.
but I think that's a really, really big thing about
Mm-hmm.
practice. So when you do it slowly, you learn slowly. When you go
Mm-hmm.
all in, it's like boom,
Yeah.
you're dealing with all of that.
Yeah. And I think that, yeah, I think that is a big thing to think about. And like if I look at it now, I mean, then that was 10 years ago when I was thinking about doing that, my headspace was different then, and I was a little more like gung ho, like I could do that. And now I look back and I'm like, oh, that is a lot of stress that I don't know that I want. And management, like the business management aspect of it, and all of that from a much larger perspective, because again, you're managing people and the business and all the things. And yes, you can get a good if you can get yourself a good business manager. So we're not doing that, ourselves, at least helping with that, but we're still the owner, right? We still have that overall part. And I agree, that part is stressful. And I feel that for a lot of, I think people who have gotten into rehab, it's something as we've come to later on in life, and some of it is because we wanted to leave some of those stresses behind. We wanted to connect more with our patients, we wanted to connect more with our clients. And now if I was to leave practice, university practice, and go and do my own, I do not think I would start a brick and mortar. I really think I'd probably go back and I think I would do small and be house call and, you know, do what we call locuming. So, visiting other places and taking, helping with that there when they're on vacation and doing that kind of thing. And consulting, and I would go back to that route, setting my own schedule, less people, less concerns, and more time to do what I love. Because I mean, I think there's also the pride of, if you have the bigger place too, of building that and doing that, and all the things that come with that too. So it's a tough one, but I can also see the stress. I feel the stress can definitely rise with that, with all the parts. pieces, parts.
When you start and you're like just starting your own practice, do you think that one of the reasons why vet rehab therapists feel they need loads of different equipment is because they're worried about what the client's perception of them will be if they're just treating with their hands? Like, do
Hmm.
you think vet rehab therapists are thinking, I need this kind of equipment to be able to market better, be able to say, this is what I've got. And the more things they have on the list, they think that the clients then perceive them to be more professional.
Oh, absolutely. And I struggle that with professionals too. So even here, I've been here like 9, 10 years, and I feel like I don't care how much I educate my colleagues around me in the other specialties and the surgeons and things, I still get them. It's better now. But when I first started too, especially they'd come in, they're like, "Oh, I have a patient. I think it needs hydrotherapy." And I'm like, "Great. You mean it needs rehab?" And they're like, "Well, yeah, it needs the water." And I'm like, "That might not be appropriate." Like, let's go back a minute. Like, wait a minute, that's not all it is. There's so much more. And I think clients see the same thing. They'll come in and we'll talk about like, here's all the different options of what I'm going to do. And they're like, "Oh, you have cold laser?" And I was like, "Well, yes, but that may or may not be what we're going to, it's only a part of what we use. That's not, yeah." So I think that how to educate our clients and our referral veterinarians and everybody, and like what is all involved with this, right? I always appreciate a client. I have a couple clients who they come in and they're like, "We just love that they come in and have body work done with you." Like they understand the other parts that are important and are completely fine with that. But yeah, I think that it is something, it's again an education piece of the tools are great and we do use them, and there's some cases where they are desperately needed, but on the other hand, there's still so many options and you don't have to have all those things, that you can do so much with them, and maybe it takes a little longer, maybe depends on the scenario, and then other times it's not appropriate to do the modality. It's absolutely not appropriate. I mean, I've made dogs worse with hydro and I'm like, "Oh, well, that's not what we need to do. Let's get out of there and let's try something else." So yeah, absolutely.
And I think that's just a general problem I think that we have just in rehab. Because if I think about it, clients for some reason feel like when we're using PMF mat or laser or something that they're getting more value.
Hmm.
And that comes from the client, right?
Yeah.
For them, if you're just using your hands, like if they're on the mat and you're using your hands, well, they got value there. And if I actually look at this from a sort of veterinary perspective,
Hmm.
you'll know, like when you've done GP veterinary medicine, there are those clients that will come in and you'll look at the dog and you just literally can't find anything wrong with the dog. There's nothing wrong. And they're not happy because now you haven't found anything and you haven't injected it with anything. And then they'll make another appointment and they'll say, no, they're just not right. You say, okay, let's take some blood. And you take the blood and you can't find anything. And there's no real symptoms, but the owner is just convinced that there's something wrong. And I remember once when I probably had been working for like a year or so, and I remember going and I was at the stage where I'd like just qualified and like you need to do everything by the book, right?
Yeah.
And I kept on telling this client, no, there's nothing. Not gonna give it anything. There's no indication to give it anything. And I remember going through into the like little dispensary area, and I spoke to one of the older vets, and I was like, I don't know what to do. Like, she just keeps coming back. She's convinced. I've spent so much of her money. I've drawn bloods, I've done blood smears, I've done all these things, and I can't find anything wrong. And she says she's just saying the dog's just not right, but there's no symptoms. And then I told the surname, and he was like, "Oh, just give it a vitamin B injection. That's all you need to do." You know. And
Yeah.
then I was like, "Really?" He said, she just needs the dog to have an injection. Just give it a vitamin B injection. Not going to do any harm." So I was like, okay. And then she was like, came back, and I was like, I said to her, listen, maybe we just need to give your dog a vitamin B injection just to give it a little bit of boost. Anyway, I gave it, and then like 2 weeks later, I saw her for another one of her dogs or cats or whatever, and she said, "Oh, he's doing so much better after the vitamin B injection, all sorted." And that's
Yeah.
the thing, is sometimes they just need you to
Do
do
something.
something or that they can
Hmm.
see. So when you're
Hmm.
using your hands, sometimes for the clients, the perception that they have because they don't really know what you're
Hmm.
doing.
Yeah.
One thing I do think that really helps if you don't have any equipment, right, is to talk them through a lot of the
Yes.
stuff. A lot of the
Mhm.
time, we're actually just chatting to them and doing something. But if you're actually saying, right now, this is what I'm doing, I'm palpating, and this is what
Mhm.
I can find. I'm going to try and do this to loosen it up. I'm doing, and actually really explain what you're doing instead of actually just having a conversation about their daughter and their wedding and whatever.
Mhm.
To explain to them, especially if you don't have any equipment. That's a really good
Yeah.
way. I find when I've just
Mhm.
had my hands to treat.
Yeah. No, and I agree. And I have the advantage of my clients are not always present for appointments. It depends on this, circumstance. But when they are, since I have the students and I'm teaching at the same time, I'm oftentimes explaining what I'm doing as I'm doing it, and I'm going through the processes, and I'm talking about it from, you know, medically, scientifically, what do we have evidence, like what's going on and why am I doing this and what are we doing and what am I finding? And then I'll have them come over and feel if I feel something, like a trigger point or, those things. And the clients, I'm talking to the students, so I'm teaching the students, but the client's there, right? And it's so many times the client's like, I've never realized that, so they're hearing it as we're doing it. So it's kind of a win-win because they get both at the same time, teaching the students, but the clients are learning as well. And I think that, so it goes right to your point. I think that's really beneficial for them to understand the why of what we're doing, and why we're doing it. And that, heck, yeah, this does make a difference. And I mean, really, if we look at human physiotherapy, I mean, done enough times, they do not use modalities near as much,
No,
right? It is very much not. It is very much manual therapies, make cryotherapy or, heat, and then exercises, right? Therapeutic exercises. So if we look at that, then, that's not using a ton of modalities. And we have to look at, there's still all these things that we can do without having all that. So yeah.
let's say you've started your practice, you've just been using your hands and your brain, like you said,
Mhm.
and you're now going to plan to get yourself some form of equipment. What's the first piece of equipment that you would recommend with
Mhm,
limited
mhm.
resources?
Yeah. Ooh, that's a tough one because of course, I like them all for various reasons. And this is going to be definitely a contentious one because I feel like a lot of people have their personal preference, right?
Yeah.
So for me, one of the first pieces of equipment that I had beyond, your basic, you know, well, I would say if it wasn't a physical modality, I would say using, having your balance equipment, right? So like those things I think are the more important to have something like that you can do some therapeutic exercise with. But if we're looking at more of the other kind, I think that's what you're leaning towards. I had a therapeutic laser first. For me, that was, and partially that's because that's what we already had in the practice. Like it was, um, so for me that was a very important piece of what I utilize that quite a bit, and I do utilize it quite a bit. Again, still just another tool, but we utilize it significantly just because, and it was so much more common now and common in practices. So I do utilize that as part of my therapy, and so that would be higher on my list potentially. Um, and then I think from there, I have a combination, a therapeutic ultrasound TENS unit, right? eSTEM unit. So that's kind of nice because I will say I probably don't use it as much as I should or as much as I used to use it, now that I have some other things. But those are less expensive than I think buying. You could definitely, if you're like, cost conscious, there are some lasers you can get for not as expensive. You don't have to go the big guns if you don't want to, but you can, get some of those therapeutic ultrasound TENS units, those things refurbished, used on the human side or even the veterinary models, and they're not that bad. And you can do a lot with having that combination, I feel like. So those would probably be my top ones, honestly, especially starting small if you don't have a lot of space. Of course, I love having hydrotherapy, but that's space, right? And so
Yeah.
if you're limited, those things are small, they're portable. You can use them for quite a few things. Yeah, that's probably where
Yeah,
I'd
and
start.
I love the idea of all the fitness equipment because that's
Hmm.
affordable,
Yes.
and that's really like exercise and home exercise programs and all that is like something that you can do with those clients.
Hmm.
So to be able to show them using those kind of equipment is great.
Yeah, that's what I'd start with first. That would be my number one. And then
Yeah.
go from there. Yeah.
And I loved your advice about how you teamed up with the
Mhm.
hydrotherapists. And, I think the collaboration with other team members, even if they're not part of your direct team, you can create a team with, so if you are mobile or even if you're brick and mortar, you've got a small brick
Mhm.
and mortar with a consult room and you don't have a swimming pool or a hydrotherapy unit or anything, you can easily team up with people in your
Mhm.
area and refer to one another because you're going to
Yeah.
have skills that they're not going to have. So I love that idea of yours to collaborate with hydrotherapists.
Mhm.
Because as you say, like a lot of them are trained in hydrotherapy, but that's their limitation, right? That's what
Yeah.
they do. So there are not many hydrotherapists that do rehab too.
Mhm. Yep.
They're very limited to the hydrotherapy because that's their training. And the
Yep.
training is quite specific in some areas.
Mhm. Yeah, exactly. And I think that's great. And it always, I think, behooves you to know who's in your area, what's available, where what's going, and then reach out and have a good, hopefully working referral relationship with them, because they're going to see things that they want to send to you. You're going to see things are going to be sent to them. We all have limitations, and so knowing what that's just, again, the resources, right? So I think that's definitely beneficial for that, for those
So if you
reasons.
look back at your journey now, is there one thing that you wish you'd known maybe before you started when you had limited resources?
Yeah, oh gosh, that's a good question. I think the biggest thing is knowing that, like, time is a huge resource, and so looking at if I could have scheduled things in a different way, like really looking at my schedule of how to maximize my
Mm,
ability to do more rehab, if I was working in a general practice setting, how I could have maximized me being able to do more of the rehab and less of the general practice, and how to really have worked that in, or looking at unique different ways of adding that to the general practice where they would have seen the income improve, so like would have let me do more, those things. I think that's one of the areas that I would have looked at. And then I do integrative stuff, so I added acupuncture to my treatment protocol with things. So I add that training, and I wish I could have. I know some people start with one, then do the other. Some only do one or the other. For me, they're very tied together now that I do both. And again, if you don't have a lot of space,
mm,
having acupuncture or spinal manipulation as another tool, training that you can have to use, that's another, I think, super valuable. So then your cost is basically your time of learning to do those things, but you don't need anything more than, just the space you already have. So you don't need anything extra that way, and you don't need any fancy equipment, and you don't need anything expensive. And so whether you're doing brick and mortar or you're doing mobile, being able to add those skills. So any new skills you can add that take less space. So acupuncture, spinal manipulation, myofascial work. So learning to do, like, I just took, like, in the last couple of years, I've taken some more myofascial courses and kinesiology taping and things like that. And I'm like blind blown, like, why did I not get into this earlier? And like, I mean, I knew it in the back of my mind, but like really going down the deep dive, which I know we're learning more and more about. So it's not that it's something we're all coming to more and more now, but the role of fascia of, man, if I would have had that tool back then when I didn't have a lot of stuff, oh, that's what I would have done. I would have been using so many more of my fascial tools and the, kinesiology tape and all that. So I guess that's another way. Just those things, you could have expanded the manual therapy so much more if I'd had that, like, knowledge and training. So I think,
yeah.
don't ever sell yourself short on your training. Like, it's all what you can always be doing more training, always be doing more CE, and getting more nuggets, more things to add in that you can use, even if you can't expand the space or the equipment. Just having more options. There's so many options you can have without having those things. So that's the big stuff, I think.
Love it. It's, at Online Pet Health, our saying is vet rehabbers, hashtag never stop learning. So exactly
Exactly.
what you say. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Jessica, it's been so lovely chatting to you. Thanks for sharing your journey and giving so much advice. I think everyone's learned a lot.
Oh, well, thanks for having me, Meg. It's a pleasure.
Cheers for now. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
If you enjoyed this podcast, please hit the subscribe button so you get notified every time I load a new podcast. I'm here every week talking to vet rehab therapists from all over the world about all things vet rehab. A big thanks to our sponsor, Paul Prosper. Their sponsorship allows us to be able to give this podcast to you for free, so please go and check them out, paulprosper.com. Don't forget to bookmark the next Vet Rehab Summit. It's on Saturday, the 31st of October, 2026. Come and be a part of the world's largest online veterinary rehabilitation conference created specifically for you, the vet rehabber community. Online Pet Health members get VIP complimentary access to the Vet Rehab Summit. For more information about continuing education for vet rehabbers, you can go to onlinepethealth.com. And if you want access to our free membership, we update the webinars in this area every 3 months. You can sign up at onlinepethealth.com/free.